There was a famine in the land beside the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went unto Abimelech, king of the Philistines, unto Gerar. And the Lord appeared unto him and said, Go not down into Egypt, dwell in the land which I shall tell thee of. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee, and will bless thee. For unto thee and unto thy seed I will give all these countries, and I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father, and I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and will give unto thy seed all these countries, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because that Abraham obeyed my voice, and kept my charge, my commandments, and my statutes, and my laws. And Isaac dwelt in Gerar. There's a famine that comes in the land. And this isn't the first famine. Remember, Abraham had a famine during his time. And he had to face that famine. You know, and what this reminds me of is that all of us have times in our lives, trials and troubles that we have to face. There are things that will come up. And they're really, you folks, you've been here long enough, and you've heard the preaching and teaching of this. Troubles and trials are allowed or sent by God. And see, and again, a baby Christian or a carnal Christian, sometimes if they hear that and they might struggle with that, but if you have been saved for any length of time and you have grown, and that's important, you've grown in the Lord, you understand that those trials and those troubles are not sent to destroy you. They're actually sent to strengthen you and to help you grow into the way the Lord wants you to be. Now, in this case, we see this famine, again, is another famine, and it's besides like the first famine that was in the days of Abraham, according to verse number 1. And we see that Isaac goes unto Abimelech, king of the Philistines, into Gerar. And around this same time, the Lord appears to him. And some of this is interesting because we see that the Lord makes mention in verse number 5. He says, verse number 3, verse number 4. Verse number 4 says, And I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and will give unto thy seed all these countries, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. But here's the reason. He says, because that Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. Do you see that from obedience comes blessings? Think about it for just a minute with me. A father's dealing with his son, or it can be a mom dealing with her children. And quite frankly, a child has some decisions to make even when they're young, and as the older they get, they should understand better. Look, if I obey mom and dad, there are some blessings. The more that I see that I'm obedient and I do what I'm supposed to do, and it should be for love's sake, honestly, but if they're obedient and they obey from the heart, then listen, we can do these things. But if you disobey, then there's consequences. Do you see that from obedience comes blessings? That used to be general understanding. It seems like today we've lost our minds and thinks we can do whatever we want and we ought to still be blessed. It's kind of that entitlement mentality. But if you break the law, the officer is going to arrest you. At least you hope they will. And in today's society, you're not even sure. All right? But there's consequences for your actions. Well, Abraham had done what the Lord told him to do, albeit he had his moments of faithlessness. He had his moments of struggle. But remember, many lessons, it feels like several lessons ago now, we saw that by the time that the Lord asked him to sacrifice Isaac, Abraham had learned some things. And that comes from experience with God. Now, Isaac, in similar fashion, is going to have to learn to trust God. Do you understand that I can live a life in front of my children and they can see the Lord working in my life, but some things they have to learn by experience. And I've said this before here, but I think it's worth saying again. I can look back over the course of my life And I can see certain things that happened in my life as an early teen, later teen, as a young adult, and now as an older adult, where God never left me alone. And that's learned by experience. Sometimes life experience is the best teacher. And you've learned, and many in this room, you're old enough, I've got some younger ones, but many of you in this room, you've lived long enough to where you know that for a fact. You've seen the Lord work. You've seen the Lord come through, and it's life in general. And if you're faithful to God, you learn that He's always there. Isaac's going to have to learn some things, just as his father learned some things. And I can't impart that to my children. They can see it, that I'm faithful. And that's why we need to be good teachers to our children. And it's not just what I say, it's what I do. It's very important. And so Isaac, though, like many, he's going to do some things that he's picked up from his father that were not good things. Isaac's going to face some battles. And as we've said, battles come to all of us. Genesis chapter 26, verse number 6 says, "And Isaac dwelt in Gerar, and the men of the place asked him," verse number 7, "of his wife. And he said, She is my sister, for he feared to say, She is my wife, lest, said he, the men of the place should kill me for Rebekah, because she was fair to look upon." Does this sound familiar? This is chapter 12, Pharaoh. Remember Pharaoh? Remember that Abraham went down to Egypt because he sojourned there because the famine. He gets there and he asks Sarah on the way in. He says, "I need you to say that you're my sister and not my wife." Because why? Because he was afraid the men would kill him for her sake. Well, he doesn't just do it there. He does it with Abimelech too. Now, Abimelech is a title. And so, look at Genesis chapter 20, verse number 2. "And Abraham said of Sarah his wife, She is my sister. And Abimelech king of Gerar sent and took Sarah." Well, she's your sister, right? Well, verse number 5. "Said he not unto me," and this is when the Lord comes to Abimelech. And Abimelech says, "Wait a minute, Lord. Said he not unto me," verse number 5, "She is my sister, and she herself said he is my brother." And this is something they cooked up together. They conspired together to do this for Abraham's safety. "In the integrity," this is what Abimelech tells the Lord, "in the integrity of my heart and innocency of my hands have I done this." Notice what God tells Abimelech. "And God said unto him in a dream, Yea, I know that thou didst this in the integrity of thy heart, for I also withheld thee from sinning against me, therefore suffered I thee not to touch her." We won't go on now for sake of time, but basically he restores Abraham his wife, he gives gifts, but the testimony, it's rough that Abraham was supposed to be a man following God, and you have a Gentile king that's now scolding Abraham. You see, what you do in this life, everything you do it affects your testimony. Abraham could have been so much more of a testimony, but this is a blight on Abraham. It really is. Now, and so guess what Isaac picks up from his father? The habit of not taking up for his wife. You see, that's what's hard. Children tend to take on the bad habits, it seems like. And the good habits sometimes they have to be worked on. Why? Because we're all fallen. We all have this fallen nature. We don't have to teach them the bad habits. They have plenty of those. And the more and more my children grow, and I know many of you men in this room, and ladies, and some of you have told me this, you start looking at your children as they start to grow up, and you go, "Where'd you learn that?" "Oh, yeah, you got that from me, didn't you?" What do you think Isaac's doing? He's probably seen some of this. What is he going to do? He's going to do the same thing his father does. And here's the thing that you find. What you do, your children are probably going to be even worse at doing. It doesn't seem like it goes the other way. It seems like what we tend to tolerate or we tend to have a problem with, our children are worse with it. And they don't just tolerate it, they embrace it. And here's the reason why, and I don't want to get off topic. Let me just say this and move on. If we tolerate sin in our home, we tolerate the world in our home, we tolerate things that come into our home, whether it be the mentality of the world, or it's the dress standards of the world, or it's the habits of the world, our children will likely just embrace it and don't even give it a second thought. That's why it's so important. You say, why are you so, well, there's the line, I need to be over here. Because I don't want to be so close to the line that I'm going to jump the line and then I'm off into sin. That's why it's not just good to have certain standards for your children and for the young people. Those need to be yours too. Because you lead by example. You lead from the front. It seems like men of yesteryear understood that. And I'm afraid that the last few generations, we've lost that understanding and just do what I say, but I don't need those standards because I trust myself. Well, you better not trust yourself because one day you might find yourself in sin. And Isaac here, he's doing what his father did. But in Isaac's case, Rebekah is not his sister at all. Abraham was. It was that relationship. So it was a half-truth. Half-truth still a lie. It's what Satan did in the garden. Some of what Satan said was true. Would their eyes be open? Yeah. Would they know good and evil? Yeah. But what he didn't tell them was all the baggage that came with it. In Isaac's case, it was a flat lie. You see where when I said that your children, what you tolerate or what you're partial in, they'll fully embrace? This is a great example. We also see something else here. In verse number 9, he says, And Abimelech called Isaac and said, Behold, of a surety she is thy wife, and how saidst thou she is my sister? Now what happened was in verse number 8, And it came to pass when he had been there a long time, that is Isaac and Rebekah, that Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked out at a window and saw, and behold, Isaac was sporting with Rebekah his wife. And Abimelech called Isaac and said, Behold, of a surety she is thy wife, and how saidst thou she is my sister? And Isaac said unto him, Because I said, lest I die for her. That is an interesting statement. And that's the way Abraham was with Sarah. You mean you're not willing to die for your wife? Do you understand that? We know, I'm not trying to put the reasoning of the New Testament onto these Old Testament saints, but for us today, Jesus Christ loved the church just as a husband should love his wife, and he gave himself for it. Should I not be willing to die for my wife? Should I not be willing to die for my children? Should I not be willing to take a bullet, take a stand? And if it means it costs my life, so be it. I know this is a weak reasoning, but let me say this. How do we know one of the reasons why this is God's Word? Because if man's writing about himself, he's going to hide all his bad points. You know what God does? Hey, I'm going to show you these saints, and I'm going to show you their flaws while I'm at it. And when they get to the hall of faith, wait a minute, Lord, I thought you said... You're saying these men were of great faith? They struggled. Right. But in the end, they grew and grew and grew until I perfected them. Conforming to the image of His dear Son. That's what we strive for. Gives us hope, doesn't it? Now, notice here, again, in verse number 9, Abimelech, he calls Isaac, he tells him these things. And let me just say this about this portion. Do you understand that one of the reasons why Isaac is lying is because he was afraid he would have to die for her. He was afraid what man would do. Proverbs 29:35 tells us that the fear of man brings a snare. If you fear man more than you fear God, then your focus is wrong. Because God was able to keep them safe. Doesn't change the fact of the fear. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is looking fear in the face and saying, I'm still going to do the right thing. I'm still going to be courageous in the face of fear, and I'm going to stare fear down and say, I'm doing this regardless of the cost. Ask some men that hit the beaches of Normandy on D-Day. Ask some men that have fought. They decided to jump off a landing craft in the whiz of bullets and still take a hill, knowing that many of them would die that day. Do you think they were afraid? Oh, they weren't afraid. They were courageous. No. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's facing your fears and still taking it. And again, we're in a society where, well, I'm scared, so I'm not going to do anything. Then you're just going to roll over and play dead, and everything's going to roll right across you. Right. You see, the fear of God will strengthen one's faith. Look at Ecclesiastes chapter number 12 with me, if you will. It says, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. What you should really fear is the one that can cast your soul into hell. In fact, the Lord later in the Gospels would talk about that. Fear not the one that can just kill the body, but fear the one that can kill both body and soul. And so our duty is to fear God and keep His commandments. 2 Corinthians 5:7 says this, for we walk by faith, not by sight. You understand that as Christians, we should be walking by faith in our life, not be walking by everything that we see. Because sometimes what you see is not real. And boy, today especially. I was just seeing an ad a few weeks ago for Apple and their whole glasses that they've made, and folks, it's scary. And I just heard just this week where someone was reporting that they could take like a few minutes of recording of a person's voice, and they could put it in a program, and they could literally type out a speech, and it would sound just ever so slightly. You could tell it wasn't the person because certain words were still computer. It sounded like a computer, but mostly it could have been passed off as that person's voice. That's scary. I mean, we're going to get to the place where someone could write a speech. They could be in the Bahamas. They could dub it down into a system, and it would sound like they're still in a studio somewhere. Oh, they preached this week. No, they actually were off in the Bahamas. Don't get any ideas. That's scary. I mean, people aren't doing the work anymore. Let's just throw it in this system. It's going to write a letter for me. You look like a professional. You're not a professional at all. You just know how to use software. Right. And so people that can really do the job are going to lose a job. So the fear of man brings a snare. Notice here in verse number 12. Then Isaac sowed in that land and received in the same year. Let me back up for just a minute. It says, and Abimelech said, what is this thou hast done unto us? One of thy people might lightly have lain with thy wife, and thou shouldest have brought guiltiness upon us. And Abimelech charged all his people, saying, he that toucheth this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. And so Abimelech does the right thing here. He says, okay, if anybody touches this man or his wife, they're going to die. So there was an understanding of right and wrong. And again, this goes to tell us that we talk about how people don't really know right. I mean, these are the Philistines. And we know how bad they were. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. And they understood right and wrong. Basic right and wrong. They had the death penalty. For some odd reason, we don't even understand that today in today's society. And we're supposed to be founded on Christian principles in this land, and we've lost it. Verse number 12, then Isaac sowed in that land and received in the same year 100-fold, and the Lord blessed him. And the man waxed great and went forward and grew until he became very great. For he had possession of flocks and possession of herds and great store of servants, and the Philistines envied him. Now this kind of moves into a different topic here, but notice the fortune that Isaac gets. And let me just say, Isaac here, he received 100-fold for what he sowed. That's impressive, folks. You say, well, I just wish God would rain His blessings down. Understand two things. One, this is God's physical people. God is blessing them with physical blessings. We are a spiritual people, and God blesses us with spiritual blessings. If we get added physical blessings, thank God for them. But, the Christian in Ghana or in Zambia or in India that doesn't have much and is trying to live for the Lord doesn't mean because they don't have much they're not living for God. Right. We are His spiritual people. But in this case, the Jews were they are God's physical people. He's blessing him with physical blessings. He needs to grow greater because of the future he has with the Lord. The other thing I want to point out, and this is more of a basic principle, God does not bless laziness. You say, well, this person over here is lazy. Understand, we're in this corrupt world. But when God blesses, He doesn't bless laziness. Do you understand? Notice what he did. Isaac sowed first. It wasn't just going to rain down. Although God would rain down blessing to the children of Israel in the wilderness, but He was bringing them through the wilderness. God blessed his efforts. And honestly, if you want to serve the Lord, you need to do some work and see what God's going to do. You say, I don't have much. Well, first, have you tried? God blesses those that are responsible. God blessed him after he'd put in the effort. Isaac sowed in that land, and he was given divine favor from the Lord. And that's a basic principle that our children need to understand. Now, you know this. It doesn't take long that this world starts to envy what you're doing. In the Philistines' case, what do? They envy Isaac. They envied Isaac's wealth. They envied his possession of flocks, his herds, the great store of servants he had, and they envied what he had. So what do? Well, like the world always does. They're not content to just sit by and see someone prospering. They stopped up the wells that were his. Notice, verse number 14, or verse number 15. For all the wells which his father's servants had digged in the days of Abraham his father, the Philistines had stopped them and filled them with earth. And Abimelech said unto Isaac, Go from us, for thou art much mightier than we. You know what? They didn't want to see the blessings. They were scared of what could happen. And based upon Abimelech's statement, it seems like Isaac was even greater than they were. But he didn't use that greatness or that mightiness to hurt them. He left. And the Philistines are stopping up his wells. He had a right to say something about it. He moved on at this point. Just because I have the ability to do something doesn't mean that I should do it. In other words, I may have the ability to bring charges or hurt someone. That doesn't mean that I should do it. Just because I have the power doesn't mean I should just use it to hurt someone. Isaac moves on. He had every right to say something. He had every right to do something, but he didn't do it. He took the punch and he walked away. Now, that doesn't mean you never defend yourself. Someone's breaking into your home or hurting your family. You should be able to defend yourself. But in this case, he moves on. And again, the Philistines envy him for what he has. That's the world. The world sees something, and we see this today. Smash and grab. Oh, the police aren't going to prosecute. I'll just shoplift, and they're not going to prosecute anyways because it's so rampant. We're overloading their system, so let's just smash what we want to take. Oh, that's animal instincts. Yes. It's not right. Because this person has a lot, then they're all of a sudden evil. I've said this before. Many corporations have done a lot of good in our society over the years, and before tax benefits and after tax benefits. So don't start with, will they get a tax break? Because there's a lot of companies that were started by good people that helped well before there was any tax benefit. Right. I can give you names. They did it because they knew it was the right thing to do, and many of them were Christians. And some, even though they weren't be Christians of saved and whatnot, they still wanted to help society. So don't give me that. A lot of companies have done a lot of good over the years. And so, but then you see the way animal instinct is today. Philistines, they envy, so let's just stop up his wells. That's like today. I don't like that he has so much. Let's take some of what he's got. Communism, socialism, at its finest. Verse number 17, And Isaac departed thence and pitched his tent in the valley of Gerar and dwelt there. And Isaac digged again the wells of water which they had digged in the days of Abraham his father, for the Philistines had stopped them after the death of Abraham. And he called their names after the names by which his father had called them. I want you to just take a moment and notice something. What's he doing? The wells of the Philistines stopped up. He goes and he digs again. This world And the Philistines are a great type of the flesh. Egypt's a great type of the world. For just for the sake of this moment, notice something. The world is going to fill up some things that have been done, things that have been worked on, things that have been dug, work that has been done. The world will come behind and will fill those things up with filth. Will fill up those wells that need to be there in your life, and will fill them up with filth if you're not careful. You know what we have to do? We have to dig them again. We have to labor. It's not enough that, and I'm going to use this church as an example, it's not enough that Brother Atkins did a lot of work. It's not enough that Pastor Reagan did a lot of work. We have to make sure that the wells that they dug are healthy and thriving, and then we have to dig new wells. We have to build upon what those men did. And we have to make sure what they've done and the good things they did are maintained. That's what Isaac's doing. Isaac is taking what has already been done. He says, okay, they've done this. I got to dig that filth out. They stopped him up with all kind of debris and junk. This world will throw junk into your wells. Your children, your family, your home, dig it out. Take care of it. That's what Isaac's doing here. They stopped up the wells. He's going back behind it. And notice what he's doing. He's naming those wells again, but he's not giving them new names. He's giving them the same names that his father gave. It reminds me of the ancient landmarks that your father erected, that you're not supposed to move them, you're not supposed to get rid of them, you're supposed to make sure they're there. And it's the same names. Today's society, there's a lot of people trying to rename landmarks. You erase history. If you change history, you can change a people with time. Sometimes that history is ugly, but it needs to be remembered because it's what we came from. Proverbs 22:28 says, remove not the ancient landmark which thy fathers have set. We also see something else. The Philistines would finally fight Isaac over. He said, you know what you find in this world? That when the world sees that they cannot just keep you down by just filling up those wells, by stopping you up, when they see you're going to fight for it, they're going to fight you. And they will. Oh, they're not going to go away quietly. So now we've got to do something about it. Isaac ended up having to fight. His herdmen, the herdmen of Gerar, strove with Isaac's herdmen, claiming that the water was theirs. Isaac named the well Esek because they strove with him. And then we see in verse number 21, it says, and they digged another well and strove for that also, and he called the name of it Sitnah. Sitnah means hatred. Well, what's happening? Well, the Philistines hate him for what he stands for. Just as the Philistines here would strive, you're going to have to strive with your flesh on a daily basis. You're going to have to strive with the world. You're going to have to strive with your flesh because it's there. It's going to take you down if you're not careful. Our daily walk requires us to mortify the flesh. Romans 8:13 says, for if ye live after the flesh, ye shall die. But if ye through the Spirit do mortify the deeds of the body, ye shall live. You're going to have to mortify some things in this life if you're going to succeed for the Lord. And this is done by faith in the Lord. This is done by walking in the Spirit. And this is done through the Lord. It's not something you can do on your own. Isaac had the Lord on his side. And you're going to have the Lord on your side. But the only way you're going to have that is, number one, you're going to have to do it by faith in the Lord. Galatians 2:20 says, I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. Galatians 5:16 says, this I say then, walk in the Spirit, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. Young person, are you fulfilling the lust of the flesh? Are you fulfilling the love of the Spirit? And you got to choose that on a daily basis. Every day. What you listen to, what you see, where you go. You say, you're full of a bunch of rules and regulations. Do you love Jesus? Because if you love God, you're going to want to fulfill those things. If you don't, then check your heart at God's door and see what's going on. See if you're in the faith or not. I know it's rough. This is supposed to be Sunday school. It's supposed to be easy. Wait for the preaching. This is Sunday school. Wait for the preaching, you know. I don't know what pastor's going to say this morning. I'm just gearing you up. I have no idea what he's going to preach about. So if it lines up, We didn't talk to each other. So, Christian, I mean, where are you at? What's going on in your heart this morning? Isaac 3 times has to dig some wells after those that they had stopped up, and they strive. And notice something here in verse number 22. And he removed from thence and digged another well, and for that they strove not. And he called the name of it Rehoboth. And he said, For now the Lord hath made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land. What if he had stopped at number 2? What if he had stopped at number 1? He would have never got the blessing of just keep trying, keep trying, keep trying. What if he gave up? And how about you this morning? He said, I'm just going to throw in the towel. It's not worth it. Well, maybe if you'd have tried one more time, that might have been the time that would have worked. Hey, listen, if anybody's told you the Christian life is easy, they're wrong. It's hard. Life in general is hard. And the best way you can survive it is having the Lord on your side and make sure you're on God's side. 23, verse number 23, he says, And he went up from thence to Beersheba, and the Lord appeared unto him the same night and said, I am the God of Abraham thy father. Fear not, for I am with thee, and I will bless thee and multiply thy seed for my servant Abraham's sake. And he built an altar there and called upon the name of the Lord and pitched his tent there, and there Isaac's servants digged a well. Notice something. After this 3rd time, what does he do? The Lord appears to him. What if he had stopped at number 2? Would God have appeared to him? Maybe not in the same manner. The Lord's coming to him. It's just like Abraham. Abraham, the Lord did not reveal to him the whole land until after Lot was gone. See, until you have fought in the fight, you will not know, you're not going to know the blessing of the intimacy of knowing the Lord. It takes that trial by fire to understand the close relationship with God. Keep in the fight. And then you'll understand the closeness of your Lord and Savior. Verse number 26, Then Abimelech went to him from Gerar, and Ahuzzath, one of his friends, and Philco, the chief captain of his army. And Isaac said unto them, Wherefore come ye to me, seeing ye hate me, and have sent me away from you? And they said, We saw certainly that the Lord was with thee. And we said, Let there be now an oath betwixt us, even betwixt us and thee, and let us make a covenant with thee, that thou wilt do us no hurt, as we have not touched thee, and as we have done unto thee nothing but good, and have sent thee away in peace. Thou art now blessed of the Lord. Now, honestly, Isaac, the Philistines themselves have been awful to him. Now, whether Abimelech knew all these things, like Abimelech had told Abraham, I didn't know some of these things, I don't know. But Isaac could have said no. But you know what you see in Isaac? He's willing to make this. He's willing to make this non-aggression pact. You know what that is a testimony to us? That we ought to live peaceably with all men, if possible. Now, sometimes it's not possible. And I'm not saying our nation should just make all these pacts, because we know sometimes what that means. But as an individual Christian, don't be at odds with your neighbor if you can help it. Don't be so quick to snap back. We ought to be willing to live peaceably with all men. Why are we at each other's throats so much? It comes back to pride. It comes back to our heart. Our heart is wrong if we're so quick to judge and we're so quick to be aggressive. Let's live peaceably with all men if possible. Let's find common ground. This is not some watered down, feel good, fuzzy. No, this is Bible. The Lord would tell us that in the New Testament, to live peaceably with all men if possible. And Isaac is willing to make this pact. So what do? They make this vow with each other. Verse number 30, He made them a feast, and they did eat and drink, and they rose up betimes in the morning and sware one to another. And Isaac sent them away, and they departed from him in peace. So he's willing to make this pact. So we see here this willingness on his part. The Philistines sought reconciliation with Isaac, and Isaac was willing to make this happen. Verse number 32, And it came to pass the same day that Isaac's servants came and told him concerning the well which they had digged, and said unto him, We have found water. And he called it Sheba. Therefore the name of that city is Beersheba unto this day. So after Isaac makes this pact with Abimelech, what does the Lord do? He blesses him. You know that the Lord would have us, again, we see the Lord would have us to be a people of peace. The Lord would have us to be a people with a testimony that we are willing to live peaceably with all men if possible. And that is a testimony to the people in this world that, hey, that gentleman, I did that to him, but he didn't come back on me. He came and tried to work it out with me, and he was actually kind to me. Like, what's different about you? Hey, that gentleman, he said he would be praying for me, and he prayed with me right there, and he's just been a great employee. He's been a great friend on the job. He's been a great, he was willing to come help me out. I wonder what's different about him. But if we take someone's head off as soon as we can over something small, do you really think that someone's going to look at you and go, hey, I want to know what's different about them? No, they're like everybody else I've met in this world. We ought to be willing to live peaceably with all men. So verse number 32, we see that they make this covenant. Verse number 33, we find that his servants come to him. They said they found water. The name of that city is Beersheba to this day. Verse number 33 there. And so we find that the Lord blesses Isaac for his efforts. Now, is Isaac's record spotless? By no means. But again, that gives us hope that even when we mess up, the Lord is faithful to restore us and still use us. What a great God we serve. And so we see in conclusion here, we see a couple of things. We see the fact that in Isaac's case, that he did not use his advantage of being stronger and mightier to hurt his adversaries. He went back to the wells that had already been dug, and he dug them again, and he gave them the same names that his father gave. That reminds us that we need to redig some things that our forefathers of faith have dug, the good things, and then we should build upon. We also see that he remained faithful until blessings came. Remember that he dug and they strove. He dug and they strove. Finally, he dug that third time, and there was no strife between him and the Philistines. And again, what if he had stopped at number 2? He would have never known the blessing of continuing to apply himself and follow God and what God told him to do. And we also see that he called on the name of the Lord, and how important that is for us, each one of us, to walk by faith, to have a prayer life, to have a walk with God in our lives, for our sake, for our family's sakes, for our friends' sake. And then we see that he made an agreement of this non-aggression pact between him and the Philistines. But he was only able to do that because he was non-aggressive about it himself. And Abimelech says, you know what, let's go make a pact with him. And so what an opportunity he had to be a testimony. Even in the face of what he did, they still came back around.